Although edited for television, tonight's thriller contains scenes of suspense and violence which may be unsuitable for young viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Hello?
Welcome aboard the Cygnus. Consider yourselves my guests.
You've lived out here for 20 years? Alone?
I've created companions of a sort.
We can offer you the means of returning to Earth, Doctor.
What makes you think I want to return? I will travel where no man has dared to go.
Into the black hole?
Why, that's crazy. And darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters.
According to Mike's Amazing World of Comics, Aliens Apocalypse, Destroying Angels #1 was released on January 27th, 1999. That exact date is backed up by previews, house ads, comic list, diamond shipping list, and Comic Spires guide. Solicitation copy reads, "Is it a coincidence that humans have met aliens in our far future? Or is there something sinister unfolding in the universe that prefigures the aliens on an almost unfathomable scale?" This is what Electo Throop is asking. Throop is a deep space rescue specialist cut from the same cloth as the late Lieutenant Ellen Ripley. Tough, smart, beautiful, and instinctual. But her instincts weren't enough to warn her of her latest mission. She's about to find out that even a fight with deadly aliens is nothing compared to meeting their masters, or the renegade human that has learned their secrets. Written by Mark Schultz, art by Doug Wheatley, colorist Chris Chukri, letterer Clem Robbins, editor Philip Amara, cover artist Mark Schultz. Again, publication date January 27th, 1999, genre science fiction horror, format full color, 32 pages, 1 of 4, price $2.95. Short version of the story, Dr. Casper Tellurian is one of these rich guys who's got like implants in his brain, so it supposedly prevents him from revealing stuff that the Institute doesn't want him to reveal, but he's also some rich jerk that likes to play mind games with people. He drags Electo Throop out into the woods to show her his gigantic hunting owl thing, Wicket, a great gray, and he waxes on about what a great hunter the owl is and blah, blah, blah. And then he talks about how he wants to send Throop after a person that used to be working for the Institute. It's a basic Heart of Darkness, Apocalypse Now situation where the dude went out to the nether reaches, went native, went nuts, put together a cult essentially, and then disappeared with all the information that they wanted him to gather. So they want to send her to track him down, bring him back, or at least bring back the information that he learned. And Throop has to do it because her business is failing, and it's basically this or bust. And we see through flashbacks, the guy that they're going after is Dr. Lucien Keitel. This dude has found one of the alien ships that we've seen in the Alien movie. So it's the crescent-shaped sucker. Found one of the jet jockeys, studied him, studied the eggs. So the Institute supplements her crew. They got this dude, Captain Mutombo, who's going to be flying this ship that has essentially a warp drive. That was the cheat that Schultz came up with for just the story because he wanted to explain why all of his alien stuff would be in the far reaches and not have connected to any of the other alien stuff that we've seen in the Dark Horse comics. They got a whole row of synthetics named Arch, Ball, Kane, and Deimos who are going to be working with them. And then, of course, we have Throop's own crew. And what she finds out once they're in space is that Casper Tellurian had also put his owl Wicket into spin animation to go with her. He figured the owl would be useful. Captain Mutombo is smart. He knows that they may have been infiltrated by Weyland-Yutani, particularly the synthetics. He's figured out a way to essentially cause the synthetics to freak out if they get too close to a Weyland-Yutani's ship with certain frequencies. One of them does start to wig out, and so he blows its head off with a pulse rifle of exactly the same type that we would see in the Aliens movies, even though this would have to be set quite possibly even before the first Alien, but definitely well before Aliens. So the crew make it to the last known site of Dr. Keitel's party. They get set upon by aliens, and a bunch of people are wiped out almost immediately. Visiting comicron.com, we can look at the January 1999 comic book sales to comic shops, estimated comics pre-orders by North American comic shops, based on reports from Diamond Comics Distribution. The #1 Dark Horse title of the month was Star Wars Boba Fett Enemy of the Empire #1, which was ranked 50th overall and sold 42,431 copies. Among Dark Horse titles, it was followed by the eponymous Star Wars #2, which sold 39,692 copies and ranked 58th overall. Then Star Wars Crimson Empire 2, #3, ranked 68th overall, selling 35,622 copies. Fourth ranked for Dark Horse was Star Wars Mara Mara Jade by the Emperor's Hand number 6, which sold 30,279 copies, ranking 77th overall. 5th place for Dark Horse, Star Wars Jedi Academy Leviathan number 4, selling 26,902 copies, rating 88th place overall. In 6th for Dark Horse was Grendel Black, White, and Red number 3, selling 20,660 copies, ranking 104th. 7th place was Sergio Aragones Gru and Ruferto number 2, selling 14,914 copies, ranking 128th overall. Finally, in 8th place for Dark Horse is Aliens Apocalypse Destroying Angels number 1, selling 13,828 copies, ranking 134th overall. Following it were the Dark Horse original title Ghost, a bunch of manga, and the Subhuman miniseries, also by Mark Schultz with Ryan.
Hello everybody, and welcome to the Alien vs Predator Galaxy podcast, the original Alien and Predator podcast. This is Aaron Percival, aka Corporal Hicks.
And this is Adam Zeller, aka Ridgetop.
We wanted to do our little bit to contribute to, and that involves finding somebody of note in the Alien and Predator universe. We went for an author who is responsible for quite unanimously one of the favorite Alien comics, because it's an interpretation that a lot of fans stuck to until Prometheus came out, and to this day it is still an interpretation that people are like, you know what, I preferred Destroying Angels. So for this episode we're talking to Mr. Mark Schultz, most well known for Destroying Angels I think among the fandom, but has quite an illustrious career in Alien writing and Predator writing, having done quite a few series and shorts.
Before we dive into your work on the franchises, for our listeners and viewers out there who might not know much about yourself, could you tell us a little more about Mark Schultz?
Do you have any particular interests yourselves, like when you're not working?
I'm interested in the sciences in general, and specifically the biological sciences and paleontology. I've got a good friend who's a working paleontologist who I've been lucky enough to do some visual extrapolations of what dinosaur fossils that he's worked with might look like. So basically I'm serving as his wrist. He's feeding me what his expertise tells him this dinosaur might have looked like while it was living, and I try to execute that.
So you were going to say something about Aliens, Apocalypse, the Destroying Angels, the final battle, the quickening. You know, what were you going to say about this thing?
First thing, I could talk about that title.
I'm not quite sure why the Apocalypse name was stuck on this. I wanted to just call it Aliens Destroying Angels, and somewhere along the line, Dark Horse decided Alien Apocalypse was going to be the overriding title, but it never went anyplace after that. The editor, Phil Amara, who I had worked with when he was an editor at Kitchen Sink Press, he had been my editor for a while on Xenozoic Tales. He had moved out west, was working with Dark Horse, and I again just got a call and the offer for a job. It was my pitch, and it was predicated. I was really happy when they indicated that I could use conceptual material from the first movie, Alien, which hadn't been available to be integrated before then, at least not for me, but it was at that point, and they allowed me to get back to my primary love of Alien, the Lovecraftian elements, the idea that it's a big unknowable universe and we're just a small, relatively unimportant part of that. So that's what was really intriguing, and that really got my juices flowing.
You know, Destroying Angels Part 17, Revenge of the Son of the other stuff, it was just Aliens as Angels. And that makes you think, right? Like, they're going to brand that. There's supposed to be an Aliens Apocalypse Part 2 or some follow-up, right? But no dice.
That was something we discussed while we were both reading the book, or I think you read it and then I was reading it, and then that opened up a discussion about it while I was reading it, was the thought that clearly they were going for a new direction with Aliens with this book that was not ever manifested. And one assumes that the Apocalypse branding was a way of differentiating this series from the stuff that had gone before, I think in large part because this was the first Dark Horse miniseries where they were allowed access to the lore from the first movie. Even though they continued to use the Aliens branding to unify, although I personally, especially in hindsight, especially after companies like Marvel have already done this, but if you're wanting to say this is coming out of Alien rather than Aliens, then maybe just call it Alien and don't have the Apocalypse part on there. But apparently that this was the one miniseries in the initial initial cycle where they had access to that lore. And I assume there's a way of differentiating that miniseries from what had come before and what would presumably go after, is that, okay, this is a particular setting, drawing more heavily from the first movie, and then they'll continue to work on this in the future, except they didn't.
Schultz said that in that same interview.
And I had one advantage in that story, and I've been trying to remember the whole process of making that, but if I remember correctly, that series, Apocalypse Destroying Angel, was the first time that Dark Horse had been given permission to use Alien, the concepts in Alien. Before that, it was all Aliens, the second film. No one else had had the option of exploring the mythology behind the space jockey and where these people came from and the questions that were left from the first film. As much as I like Aliens, the Cameron film, for me, it does not have the weight. It's not the important classic piece that Alien is because of the scope and the feeling of a Lovecraftian universe behind things. Alien was a very important film for me because of the fan press, just the movie-related periodicals of the time, the late 70s. I was very aware that this was in process. There was a lot of good hype. I'm not sure what the game plan was of 20th Century Fox, but it seems to me in retrospect there was a lot of information that was being put out in the press about how much of a game changer this would be. And with some examples of Giger's art and some of the concept work that was being done. So I was primed. I was ready to see this. And I saw it the first week of its release. My wife-to-be and I went and saw it, just the way you should in a big theater in an area that wasn't my home base. So I was even in kind of I was neat because it was outside my comfort zone type of theater and with a full crowd. And it was about as perfect a movie-going experience as you can ask for. It was one of those films that you don't think about when you're watching it because you're so engrossed. It's such a good piece of filmmaking. And the audience, the people around me, were reacting the same way. You could just see how affected everyone was by the excellence of the filmmaking as well as the subject matter. The subject matter didn't matter as much as the execution. Now, of course, I love the subject matter because that's what I'm into. And then the realization came to me, which really, why it was effective for me, was it was one of the most Lovecraftian movies. That here was the odd cinematic experience that got beyond just fear of having your throat cut or something, or fear of something jumping out in the dark, to the idea that this is a huge universe that really, we're not at the top of the food chain in this universe. And Alien in that movie, you couldn't be defeated. It was something beyond our understanding or the ability of these people to cope with. That mystery behind all that feeling of something beyond our understanding was real important to me. That's an important element in science fiction and horror that I enjoy. And that was done so well, and you see it so seldom in films. That really made a big impact on me. So long story there, I know, but that's how important that film was to me. And one other thing that I didn't realize at the time, although it did have an impact on me, was the fact that Scott made the hero of the piece a woman, which had, since probably the 1940s, Hollywood had gotten away from the idea that the person in the crew that was the most level-headed, that kept her crap together and was able to pull out at the end, was female. And that was, for my storytelling and my work, that was pretty important to see that.
It seemed like he'd be a good fit. Out of all these things I've been reading, this one feels the most like the first Alien, right? It has that kind of haunted house vibe. It has like a Captain Nemo sort of thing going on, or like the, what's his face in the black hole?
Oh, yeah.
Like that, the guy who goes rogue and it's off by himself doing his terrible science.
Max was the robot, but I can't remember the name of the scientist, but I know what you're talking about. And I think maybe it was because of Derek William Crabb with the Fanholes podcast, or maybe because I want to say that they did a black hole, like maybe the projection booth or something like that. But I've been exposed to a lot of black hole media of late. I think because there was an anniversary this year. I think that, what was it, 79 that movie came out, or 80, and so it's the anniversary year.
Yeah, I think I want to say like 78 or 79.
What I know for sure is I actually saw that one theatrically, and it wasn't one that stuck with me, although there were sequences that definitely stuck with me. It was much more of a horror movie than any of the sci-fi stuff I'd been exposed to up to that point. And I did have some of the action figures, so there is a weird kind of connection with me with the black hole. Plus, I was buying some of the Whitman books or the Dell books, I'm not sure which, and they were having a lot of house ads for the comic book adaptation and continuation, although I personally never bought any of those.
Yeah, it's expensive. I looked it up. Really, it's hard to get.
Well, my understanding with that is that the continuation of the story was only in the last issue or two of that run before it got canceled, and that very last issue was never actually distributed as a single issue. You could only get it as part of a 3-pack in certain locations in the country. So that's part of why it's so expensive, is it was never something you could get off the newsstand. If you did not get the specific pack in a specific region, then you could not ever finish that set.
Oh man, well there you go. That's a good reason. Reinhardt is that guy's name. It just occurred. Right?
The scientist, that sounds right. Okay.
Yeah, I want to say Max, but that's the robot. Anyway.
Well, wasn't the actor like Maximilian Schell or something like that anyway? Or am I thinking of Flash Gordon?
No, that's it. Yeah, no, that's it. Because it was Maximilian played
Reinhardt
and the robot.
Ah, okay.
Maximilian, I believe. But yeah.
By the way, I will say too, as somebody who saw that theatrically and who saw Star Wars at the drive-in, one of the reasons why I favorite Star Wars, the design work on the black hole was really good. I think that it was not written for the younger audience. It was written for an adult audience. It was still that mentality of like a silent running, and then they try to throw some androids, robots at it and say, no, it's Star Wars. But this very much had more in common with like Logan's Run and with, those kind of movies. The more like not even Planet of the Apes, because Planet of the Apes had that crossover vibe where it's really like teens and up for Black Hole, and that wasn't the audience they needed to sell action figures to.
Yeah, I didn't see that theatrically. I saw it at my older cousin's house, but on TV over Thanksgiving or something like that. And I had enough Catholic school under my belt at that young age to be very permanently disturbed by the end of that movie. And I just watched it again recently, and the whole stuff about they go through the corridor of light and like this Terrence McKenna corridor at the end and everything's okay for them. I didn't remember that at all. The only thing I remember is Reinhardt in the satanic metal shell in hell with all his lobotomized android crew, the end. I'm like, oh my gosh. It was nice to see and be able to contextualize the relatively happy ending, because all I remember is the guy trapped in hell with his devil robot. That was a bad time for me as a child. But anyway.
The reason why it makes sense for us to be talking about the black hole is because the black hole really does have more in common with Alien than it does with Star Wars, right? And that exploration of the metatext in the Alien franchise, the theological underpinnings, and being able to view these creatures as literal demons from hell, like physically manifested. Like Schultz in the interview talks a lot about the influence of Lovecraft. I wish that more of the Aliens product that Dark Horse put out had looked to sources like the black hole for inspiration, had played around more with those themes. So much of it is just like recycling the same bits from other Alien books and other Alien movies over and over again, instead of like trying to take from the greater science fiction and make use of that. Like, yeah, why don't you do stuff with the elements of the black hole? And, again, in this instance, it's taken from Alien, but there's a lot of parallels between those two movies. And I can see where the black hole could have potentially influenced this book. I think it has more to do with Lovecraft and with just trying to evolve from where we were at in the original movie, while also adding more of these gothic overtones. But it's still very much of a piece with both of those movies. They fit together, and that's what makes this seem like it's going to be a more interesting story than it is. It sets up, it's one of those things that's so frustrating. And, they talk a lot about how, it predated Prometheus and anticipated it. And apparently there's a section of the fandom that prefers Destroying Angels to Prometheus, but it's got the same problem as Prometheus, where it asks a few questions, it sets a few things up, and then it doesn't pay those off at all. And it just sort of stops. Narrative blue balls, essentially. It's like, I can't really extrapolate much from this because there's not enough there to extrapolate from. All I can do is point out the flaws, really, because anything that I anticipated that this was going to do in terms of really evolving the Aliens lore and giving us something new to chew on and giving us a new direction for the franchise, that's all gone by the end of the miniseries. It's just another stupid Dark Horse comic where a bunch of people I don't care about go someplace they're not supposed to. Most of them die, and the ones that don't, I couldn't care less about continuing to exist. I don't care about them having any additional stories, and it's a good thing because they don't.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the thing that I thought was so promising was that they pretty much everybody does get wiped in the core characters who are discovering this backstory, and that's kind of what I would want if it was going to continue, right? You don't want like the Luke Skywalker who shows up and he's the through line. It's more like Ripley dies in the third one. Nobody could get over that. That's how it is. That's a bummer. The impermanence of these characters, I think it fits that whole kind of black hole haunted house thing, because it's not about them per se, right? It's about the house. It's about the black hole. It's about the ship. It's about the aliens. And what this does, and I think it does it better than Prometheus, Prometheus, after thinking about it for a while, is it gives you a little bit of backstory. It doesn't give you enough that it makes perfect sense, but it gives you enough backstory without making them aliens mundane. It still has that kind of like Lovecraftian, unknowable terror to it. Is, if they are this like annihilation wave that kind of is going to wash across the universe and rebalance life in the universe, that's a pretty big unknowable thing, right? The only thing it took me a while to kind of get to appreciate that is because of that stupid prequel or like little preface thing that has nothing to do with anything and was co-written by the editor. So I don't know if he changed it or what. I don't know. That whole black and white thing with the Rick Leonardi art, which I thought the art was, I'm in the bag for Rick Leonardi. I think he's great.
Dark Horse Presents Volume 1, Number 140 was released on February 17th, 1999. Black and white, 32 pages, $2.95. Solicitation copy reads, "This month, Aliens takes the spotlight in a tale from writer Mark Schultz and artist Rick Leonardi that ties in with Schultz's current series, Aliens Apocalypse. Then shift gears with Tony Millionaire's Sock Monkey, as Sock Monkey and his pal Crow find yet another way to burn down the house. Genre, short stories, anthology. Cover artist, Rick Leonardi and Bob Wiacek. Editor, Randy Stradley. In the story, Weyland-Yutani's Dr. Natasha Foe is also recruited by Dr. Casper Tellurian to work for the Gehol God Institute. She's been studying the morphology of lingua foeta at Charonosis, and Gehol God has found a world where the aliens have never been exposed to humans. That world is Tirgu Mears, featured in Aliens Wraith, to which this is a far-removed prequel. Foe lands at Wells Church, with orders to meet with a stern black female alien linguist named Dr. Kieran Nix. After an encounter with a xenomorph, Foe is shocked to learn that its blood is not corrosive. That's an adaptation, not a genetic constant. Foe eventually falls into a xenomorph nest, but is not attacked. However, Colonial Marines, or something equivalent, shows up to exterminate the nest. Kieran Nix reveals herself as a synthetic, and is damaged gunning down any Marines that pursued Foe. Back at the Gehol God Institute, Foe is furious about being used, but also knows they could kill her at any time if she stops being useful. There's a disparity in that solicitation. The story Once in a Lifetime is actually written by the editor Philip Amara and Mark Schultz. It's penciled by Rick Leonardi, inked by Bob Wiacek, lettered by Steve Haney. Dark Horse Presents number 140 was the 182nd best-selling title of the month, selling roughly 5,571 copies through Diamond Comics distribution.
Here's the story behind that. I didn't even remember I was involved with that story till you brought it up. The story itself, the plot, was brought to me by Phil Amara, my co-author. I helped with some dialogue. I didn't have much to do with the concept or the action, or the references are all from Phil. I don't even remember. Rick Leonardi did nice art on it. I remember that, but I don't remember anything about the story in particular.
Well, just to put it out there is sense. I have that whole I have a whole thing with Billy Hines, where Billy Hines loves Rick Leonardi, and Rick Leonardi is one of my least loved artists in all of comics history. He's one of those people that will put me off a book I'd otherwise read because I just do not click with his artwork at all, and it's just an ongoing thing because Billy teases me and I tease him back about this stuff. For whatever reason, Bob Wiacek does the inks on that. Maybe it's because it's black and white. Maybe it has something to do with the subject matter. I had no problems with the artwork in that story. I thought that was some of the best artwork I've ever seen by Leonardi that wasn't inked by Terry Austin. Terry Austin is always like the dividing line for me. It's like, if it's inked by Terry Austin, there's a much better chance I'm going to like it than otherwise. But for whatever reason, it just clicked in that story. And I really liked how in a black and white story, he's able to subtly indicate the races of the individual characters. So he's doing his sort of cartoony style, but also he's adapted to be a little more harder edge and a little bit darker. And it just worked in that context. I was shocked at how much I was enjoying Rick Leonardi's artwork on a story for once.
I like it anyway, but the art, if you didn't have to fit this into a bigger narrative, it would be fine. I mean, it's kind of questionable because it seems like the premise of it is, are the aliens impressionable, right? Like the whole conceit is they go to this world that has xenomorphs on it, but no humans have ever been there, an unspoiled paradise, and these aliens just happen to be there, and they haven't wrecked everything, and there's other wildlife on the planet, and they exist in an ecosystem, and why is that? And they seem to suggest maybe it's because there's no people there, and the people are, polluting these aliens and making them bad. What's the deal? Why are these aliens there? Let's send the scientist to go check it out. And she finds out they don't have it, poison blood or acid blood, and they're like, oh, it's they haven't evolved this hostile trait on this paradise world. What's going going on with the aliens? And it ends, I mean, I think what they're implying is that when these Marines come in and shoot all the aliens, then it makes the aliens evil. I mean, is that it? Is that what they're trying to do there?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think that what it's showing is that the aliens are specifically evolving to counter the evil within mankind. Like humanity, lack of natural predators, destroys everything, basically like a virus that overtakes the entire world, and we're spreading all across the galaxy, and they are the countermeasure. They are the thing that's supposed to destroy us and keep us from destroying everything else. Like they are our nemesis, and they're like within the context of this story, they're like a divine celestial solution to the problem of humanity, and they're specifically made to go after humanity. Like these were innocent creatures until we invade. We are the serpents in their garden. We are the invaders in their world, and we are the ones who cause them to create the adaptations and manifest the hostility with which they direct at us because they learned it from us.
Why didn't I understand that? What's wrong with me?
Well, I mean, that's just an interpretation. That, right? That's just my interpretation. That doesn't mean it's right. That's just where I'm coming at it from.
Because I was reading it as in this prequel, these aliens are just like trying to get by in this cruel universe. And then in the main story, they're the destroying angels, right? They're like these cosmic agents of ruin that sweep across the whole universe once the population of the universe reaches a tipping point, or they say I don't know what you call them, because they're not really engineers in this, right? They're like the Promethean giant space jockey guys.
I literally, because I was going to make in my notes, I made reference to the final alien creature in the miniseries, and I was originally writing engineer alien, and I was like, no, this is 1999. There's no such thing as an engineer yet. It's a space jockey alien. So yes, exactly.
Yeah, and I think that's a much more sustainable storytelling choice. But anyway, when the space jockeys got too big for the britches, then the aliens came, and they must have been. I'm thinking like it's an unknowable Lovecraftian force, and it just swoops across and wipes everything out, and you get a do-over. But if it is them, playing along with the universe until the universe gets to be hostile enough, and then they're like, they're activated, and then they swoop across. That's a whole different story. That's actually a lot more compelling, really, because one of the big questions in the main series is who's sending these. I bet you that's it, actually, because he talks about like why are they activated or who's sending them, and he goes, oh, it's in my notes. You'll read later. There's no time now. We can't talk about it now. And it's like one of these half a dozen cliffhangers that are never going to be resolved. But I bet you that is it. Well, now I like the prequel story a lot better.
Yeah, well, because I mean, the core of the story, there's not much to it. It's just that one germ that feeds into some of the stuff they were setting up in Destroying Angels, and then you can kind of elaborate from there. So you have to connect the two. The story on its own is just, like a fetch quest, essentially. Oh, I'm on this planet. I was supposed to find out about the aliens. Oh, I found out about the aliens, and now I go back to the Gahal Gold Institute, whatever, Miskatonic University, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, the Illuminati or whatever. The Freemasons they have the G in the triangle. It looks like the compass. It's just like a little bit on the nose, but it's all right.
Well, but it's interesting in that story too, because they make a point of tying that story back to Aliens Wraith. And I forgot that Wraith did feature a space jockey, so it's not, that would have been a first manifestation of something that was seen in Alien, because I don't recall there being a space jockey at all in Aliens, to my recollection. I think it's only in Alien. So really that would be the first use of any lore, but it's only the visual and it's not elaborated upon. And then it's the editor who wrote that story. I feel like what was happening is Amara, as an editor who's working on these Aliens projects, is trying to be more beholden to continuity and start building an ongoing continuity, because I think one of the things that was killing the line at this point is that nothing connected to anything else, and you could take or leave any miniseries. Nothing really mattered. And I think they were trying to make it matter from this point, and they didn't get any further than this, but they did go ahead and tie it back to Wraith. And of course, since Wraith has the more typical aliens, if you go to a place like Xenopedia, they explain that, oh, well, that story must have happened decades, if not centuries after this story, but it does establish that the aliens were on this planet. Eventually, humans are colonizing the planet, and that's how you end up with those teenagers finding the space jockey in that one-off story. And also, it makes that story mean something as opposed to being another throwaway along the line. So I see what Amara was doing, and I'm seeing the value added by having Schultz involved, and it is Schultz's characters, but there's an editorial-driven quality to that, and that's probably why that story existed, especially because it was published during the run of Destroying Angels. I think it was either between issues 1 and 2 or 2 and 3, but it was out in February of the same month as the second issue.
You're talking about the Leonardi prequel?
Yeah, the Dark Horse Presents story. story.
Yeah, but you said that because that was the thing. I really liked Wraith a lot until that last page. But if that last page, the space jockey is, are you saying it's one of these things in Destroying Angels? It's the one it's one that they find again.
Well, it's the same ship or the same, because remember there were several dead engineers, space jockeys that were also present. There was just the one that was alive in suspended animation, although he's not by the end of the miniseries. And so we see a space jockey corpse again in the Wraith story. So it's the same one because it's explicitly the same planet. They tell you it's the same. It's named in both stories. It's the same planet.
Oh wow! All right, well, that makes me like the last page of Wraith a lot better too. Man, this is turning up pretty good for me.
Tirga Myers is the name apparently. Yeah, same place.
Oh yeah, that is named. So I wrote that down in my Destroying Angels notes. Huh? Well, that's pretty cool. I wonder. I mean, it has to have been just a fact of it takes so much to get these things coordinated. Even if Amara is kind of tying it together, it's 1999, right? It's past the bust. Everything it's bottomed out, and they're probably looking for more sizzle and less steak. Well, and that's why they pivot to Xenogenesis.
And see, exactly. See, and that's the thing too is, I was looking at the numbers on the 98 series and specials and stuff, and I've been running the numbers across the course of the podcast, and I still felt like the series ending relatively soon from this point was premature because these books were still selling within the top 5, top 10 of the Dark Horse titles, which of course you have a sliding scale there, and of course they keep getting pushed further and further back because anything Star Wars is going to be outselling anything Aliens, right? But they were still selling reasonably well in 1998, and so I'm like, what? Why did they feel the need? I realized the license probably cost them some money, but they had a good relationship with Fox. Fox didn't give them any hassles and stuff. So why were they in the continuous publication of Aliens books? And then I started looking at the 1999 numbers, and it paints a different picture. According to the Dark Horse website, Aliens Apocalypse: The Destroying Angels #2 was released on February 24th, 1999. Solicitation copy reads, an alien, quote, angel has been met. As veil after veil is lifted, an Electro-Throop begins to grasp the enormity of the forces at work behind Dr. Keitel's deception. But the aliens may represent only the brink of an unfathomable pit of cosmic horror. Join Throop Rescue and Recovery as they follow the elusive Keitel to a petrified world that was ancient long before life first crawled on Earth. Our universe has never seemed so big, so old, and so hideously dark. Issue #2 starts with Throop about to be killed by an alien drone, but she's saved by the partially disabled Ball synthoid. Throop manages to slip away, and the drone takes out its frustration on the synthetic. Because she's already lost a lot of her crew and needs as much information as the people who were with her has gathered, she manages to recover Ball's head and run back into the ship. While they're filling out information that they were gathered at the site and trying to figure out where Keitel's people went, they discover a few other things. For instance, a container has been smuggled onto their ship that's containing xenomorph eggs. They end up shaving Ball's head and then attaching that head to the body of the Weyland-Yutani synthetic that got damaged. And he points out, hey, this might not be a great idea because I might still be compromised by programming within this body. But they all say, it'll be fine, don't worry about it. They're eventually able to track down Keitel's new location, which is way out in the far reaches. They are again attacked by alien drones. Most of the people who were left get killed on that trip. And I got to point out here while I'm thinking about it, that's one of the problems I have with this book is that Throop is supposed to be our Ellen Ripley, and she's so completely unexceptional. She's got no personality, no charisma, doesn't seem to be particularly smart, constantly leads her people into bad circumstances, can't save herself. People are constantly having to sacrifice themselves to save her, but she doesn't inspire that kind of leadership. So you have to assume one of two things. Either she's hot and they want to bang her, or their livelihood is dependent upon her as the boss lady, and so they're trying to make sure they get their paycheck, and they end up on the wrong side of that, and they die and she lives, basically through happenstance, through luck, through other people putting in an effort to save her that she doesn't seem to be warning. Just a totally lame character. I also have to point out, it's especially apparent at this point in the book, Doug Wheatley's commitment to gynecological design elements. Throop is saved ultimately by Dr. Keitel showing up with his people out of a portal that is very clearly a vagina with a clitoral hood on the top. This will happen again and be even more anatomically overt than that. Sales for February 1999 ranked Buffy the Vampire Slayer #6 in first place for Dark Horse, 36th place overall with 44,964 copies sold. Behind it in 44th place was Star Wars Vader's Quest #1, third for Dark Horse, 45th overall. Buffy the Vampire Slayer Origins #2, 4th place, 58th overall. Star Wars #3, 5th place, 61st 1st overall, Star Wars Boba Fett Enemy of the Empire number 2. 6th place, 69th overall, Star Wars Crimson Empire 2 number 4. This is the last Dark Horse title in the 30,000 range, selling 33,543 copies. In 7th place, 103rd overall, Grendel Black, White, and Red number 4. We've jumped completely out of the 20s into 19,911 copies sold. 8th place, 128th overall, was Gru number 3, selling 13,883 copies. 9th place, Ghost Volume 2, number 6, selling 13,046 copies. And just in the Dark Horse top 10, 140th place overall was Aliens Apocalypse number 2, selling 12,108 copies. Outside of the top 10 were manga titles, Usagi Yojimbo, an issue of Dave Taylor's Tongue Lash 2, and another issue of Subhuman miniseries. 98 was still okay. 98, these books are still top 5, top 10 for the publisher. But you look at Alien Apocalypse Destroying Angels number 1, first issue ranked 134th, and it doesn't get better from there. It gets worse from there. Yeah. This thing's getting outsold not only by all the Star Wars comics, it's getting outsold by Grendel, by Gru. That's not super duper numbers today. It's really not good numbers in 99. These are not sustainable numbers for licensed property, period. And it's not just Aliens. It's anything Aliens, anything Predator. It's all the lowest selling licensed stuff that Dark Horse is doing at this point. And Dark Horse is having problems as well because Dark Horse Presents is only got a year and a half left, less than a year and a half from when that Alien story gets published and its cancellation. And that was their flagship anthology, the book that launched the company. So if they're canceling Dark Horse Presents, and also you know that ultimately Dark Horse exists to publish good comics, like creator-owned comics, or at least stuff that they own. They don't want to exist solely to sell licensed books, but the market has made it to where that's still the priority. That's where the money's being made. They can't saturate the market because there's so many people interested in Buffy in 99 that what they can get out there, they're making money off of. But with Aliens and Predator, why would you allocate the resources not only financially, but just talent-wise? Why would you put Mark Schultz and Doug Wheatley on an Aliens book when you can put them on a Star Wars book that's going to sell 2 to 3 times better than the Aliens book? Why wouldn't you just do another Star Wars? And the market is supporting all these Star Wars books where it's not supporting even one Alien book and one Predator book a month. So it's just the finances become much clearer by 99. And again, it looked like this was supposed to start a new direction for Aliens, but when you're selling 12,000 copies, that's just not going to cut it. And so I understand why they pivot to Xenogenesis. And of course, that's the death knell. That's what kills them ultimately. But it's not like Aliens Apocalypse was going to save them either.
Yeah, I suppose. Is 90, I feel like 99, 2000 is when the superhero crossovers start to hit, right? Like, is that like Green Lantern Aliens and
we've had some of that already. We've already had one of the Batmans. We've already had one of the Supermans already. The distinction is that in 99 is the end of monthly Aliens comic books and monthly Predator comic books. They could not support themselves, and so they stopped doing that. And then going into the 21st century, it's nothing but crossovers, either with each other, Aliens vs. Predator stuff, or with other properties. But they're no longer producing Alien or Predator comics because they're not selling enough to justify the license.
Yeah, dang. Yeah, it's too bad. I mean, the more I kind of sit with this Destroying Angels thing, the more, a lot of parallels with Prometheus. But I think it's puts a lot more gas in the tank, this backstory, even though it's not finished. Puts more gas in the tank than the unfinished Prometheus backstory. You know, I like that they're not engineers. I think tying them together is a little bit too cute in hindsight. If you're saying these aliens are a force out there and they wrecked these giants and they're going to wreck us too, maybe God is sending them, or maybe it's a cosmic justice, or maybe hundreds of other things. That to me is more compelling than those gigantic white guys. One of them was Jesus and we didn't do Jesus right, so now they're mad and they're going to send these things. You know, that's like one story. But I think like the annihilating angels, that's a more open-ended thing. It makes the toy box bigger instead of smaller.
I in part agree with you. I do think that they put things in place, particularly with the Institute, that could fuel more and different stories. But at the same time, it's kind of recalling, I don't remember what the name of it was, but the organization that Dr. Jekyll was running in the Mummy reboot with Tom Cruise, where
I don't know.
It's a little bit like, okay, well, we have a shield now, and so we have this institute that can connect a bunch of different people who appear in different stories, but that's still a different formula. You know, it's still a formulaic thing to do. It's not something new under the sun. It's just like a linking device so that you could have a bunch of different miniseries from a bunch of different creators, and then you could like dump in, you know, the doctor with his owl guy, and he's almost like the Crypt Keeper or something where he's like, well, this is continuing to advance our plans, and just be vague about it and make everything seem more connected than it really is. Yeah, it does, but also it kind of doesn't. I think that there's more subtextual ambition in Prometheus. I think that they are trying to do something with Prometheus that's like meaningful, like trying to communicate some sort of truth that I don't think they're very good at it. I think that it's indecipherable, it's garbled, it's not necessarily very compelling, but I think they're trying for more, where this story is basically, let me go ahead and H.P. Lovecraft craft this up a little bit more, and let's like create a circumstance under which we can have, an overarching narrative tying into this institute and stuff. And I'm not opposed to that. Like, I want to see the Grant Corporation again, and I want to see these elements that are set up, bring back Xenozip, whatever you got to do. And yeah, go ahead and play with more of the lore relating to the movie Alien, but I need more than this. Like, ultimately, it's still a Ripley type character, but nowhere near as compelling as Ripley. It reminds me of when they got Emilia Clarke to play Sarah Connor, and it's like, bitch, you ain't, you're not Sarah Connor. Who the hell do you think you are? You're Emilia Clarke. You're never going to be Sarah Connor. And this is the same thing to me. Is like this character, this lead character whose name doesn't even stick in my brain, Electrothorpe, like, something. She's just like the heroine from Alien Covenant, where it's like this watered down version of Ripley, or like frickin' Romulus, whatever that character's name was. It's a strong female lead who's pantomiming stuff that Ripley did previously, and we're supposed to transfer our emotions and our support from Ripley to this person, and they're just nowhere near as interesting or as compelling. Plus, the whole thing at the end where she gets the white streak in her hair because she was so scared of the space jockey alien. Get out of here with that stuff.
Yeah, that was pretty corny.
That was really corny.
Yeah, it was.
And like I said too, like it is extremely unsubtle. Like the whole thing where there are 4 synthetics, and all 4 synthetics are named after dangerous, deviant characters from the Bible, and they're also alphabetically aligned. So there's an A one, a B one, a C one, a D one, and then once again we have to have a synthetic that goes crazy because you had a good synthetic and a compromised synthetic, and they blew the head off the compromised synthetic that was planted there by Wheatley-Yutani. But then the good synthetic had everything but his head ripped off by one of the aliens, and so they put his head on the other alien, the other synthetic's body, and he's corrupted, and so he turns evil, and he does a full David thing. It is funny. Like, maybe they did. Now that I think about it, like, I was going to say, well, there's stuff that you would naturally extrapolate from Alien and the lore where you'd end up with Prometheus, but it's really on the nose. You've got this Frankensteinian synthetic that's literally crafting new aliens by putting an egg on top of the engineer to make the space jockey giant super alien, which is really just a retread of the alien king from the Ian Edgington miniseries. Was it Renegade, I think it was called, or something like that? The one that was Labyrinth but not. That is very Prometheus, though. That is very David. I don't like this story as much as I like Prometheus to the degree that I like Prometheus, but there is a whole heck of a lot in common. But unfortunately, they both make the same stupid, frustrating mistakes with the franchise, and they don't effectively evolve the franchise. They do not find a way of moving forward by going backward.
First of all, I never saw Covenant, so I can't comment on that. But yeah, I mean, there certainly are similarities between Prometheus and Destroying Angels. Or if there's pure coincidence, or if someone was reading it. You work on these properties, and they're someone else's toy. They get to give you notes on what they want to see and what they don't. They didn't give me any notes on Destroying Angels, so I assume there was nothing in there that distressed them at the time. But they own the rights to anything I would have created in there, or any concepts. That's just part of the work for hire agreement when you do something like that. As far as them acknowledging that there was any connection, in Hollywood, that's never going to happen. And it could all be coincidence. There's no way of really knowing. It seems like there was quite a number of coincidences, but that's their business, and that's their right to handle it however they want to. It's not a very good movie. It's kind of a hot mess. And let me preface by saying I have absolute respect for Ridley Scott. He's done a number of movies that are at the top of my favorite movies of the since the 70s. He's one contemporary director who knows how to use. I'm much more of a fan of black and white movies than I am of color movies in general, mostly because most directors, or even most cinematographers, I don't get the feeling they really know how to use color. But Scott uses color in a very painterly way. So his films are, even if they're not great, they're beautiful to look at. Yeah. But I thought this film just seemed to introduce too many themes in it that weren't resolved or went nowhere. And there was too much much trying to satisfy what had been done before in Alien, and it was just a mess. And again, yeah, not every film works out. And a couple of years after that, he does The Martian, which I think is absolutely brilliant, pretty close to a flawless movie. Prometheus, they introduce this team of science, but there's hardly any recognizable methodology to the science. I mean, and I don't expect a lot in a movie, but it was, I got the feeling though, again, because he introduced a lot of themes that Scott likes, like the relationship between fathers and progeny and where do we come from, and all these things, all these various characters are kind of related to that. But I felt that this would have been served better in maybe a mini series, maybe a 6-part television series for a streaming service or something, to be able to develop those themes. It was like trying to jam too much into one 2 hour and 20-minute movie, whatever it was. I liked the end of Prometheus, where what's her name? Yumi Rapace's Shaw goes off theoretically to find the homeworld of the engineers. And I thought, wow, here we go. Let's see, and then again, I didn't see Covenant, but what I understand is that really doesn't go anyplace.
It is also, when you think about it, it has to be a sidequel because it's got to take place between Alien and Aliens. And they do the whole thing where, xenomorph is too generic of a name for the species. So he comes up with the Lingua Foeda Acheronsis, but we don't know about the aliens on Acheron until Aliens. So you're screwing up the continuity, just like freaking Romulus screwed up the continuity by having them running around with pulse rifles right out of Aliens and doing all this stuff that's like advanced beyond where Aliens would be, and yet Aliens is taking place 37 years or so after Romulus.
I just figured, again, my interest in science and biology, I just figured that this was a life form that scientists would have, if any scientists who were aware of it, whoever was describing the creature first, the scientist who had the honor of describing the xenomorph, would have given it a scientific name, or the Latin version, which is the accepted version in all languages. So if you're a Chinese scientist, you know what the English scientist is talking about when they say lingua foeda acheronsis. It's the same across language barriers. That's just standard. That was Linnaeus. I think he was Swedish back in the 17 or 1600s, came up with that system, and that's what science still uses. So I just figured that, I asked the editor, I'm trying to remember who the editor was. I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember. But I asked if there had been a scientific name, a Latinized science accepted name for the creature, and there hadn't been. So I said, well, is it okay? Do you mind if I come up with one? And they said, no, go ahead. And again, it was submitted to Fox, and they apparently didn't have a problem with it. So to me, it just needed that. Now, it's not something that, right, your average person is going to be calling the creature, but I don't know. I just like that little detail. I like that little bit of rounding out our understanding of it here.
I don't understand why these guys can't just like sit down and work out the bare basic minimum continuity. It's 2 movies of about 2 to 2.5 hours each, and none of these suckers can just sit down and figure out what happened in this one versus what happened in that one, so you're not contradicting obvious stuff that's going to drive the fans nuts. It's just, I'm so frustrated with this franchise, especially after multiple years of these Dark Horse stories that just keep spinning their wheels in the mud. And again, with something like this, where they go through the trouble of getting Doug Wheatley, who is a really fantastic artist and is very much a cut above most anybody that Dark Horse had access to for these franchises. Wheatley's the guy they got, if I remember correctly, was he the one who they got for the Star Wars, the last adaptation where they adapted the original Lucas screenplay before Dark Horse lost the rights to Star Wars? Is that him?
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, or was that Mayu?
I'm not sure.
I think it might have been Mike Mayu, but Wheatley was a really good artist. He never got to the level that I think his skill warranted, in part because he was just too slow and he didn't get enough of the choice projects. And he's still fairly early on in this book. There's definitely some wonky anatomy and stuff in here, but this still looks way better than most any Aliens book has looked since the very earliest days when they were getting guys like Sam Keith to do this stuff.
Doug was, he did a fantastic job. I can't imagine the amount of hours he put into realizing the detail and the lighting effects he put into that. But yeah, it's a magnificent achievement, and the coloring was perfect for it too, I thought. Just a gorgeous, very unique looking book. I love his work.
But as cool as the artwork is, it's still not, there's not enough meat on the bones of the story to put it over. It's like you've wasted this resource in Doug Wheatley that could have made this like a really grand representation of this franchise to a new audience, ideally, or returning a lost, lapsed audience. But I remember when this miniseries miniseries came out, I still had my shop, and they did not do anything to promote this in such a way that anybody thought there was anything but another Dark Horse Aliens miniseries with a too long title. And so I think that in the midst of making this, like in the midst of producing this, they realized that they didn't have what they needed, and that's why they pivoted to Xenogenesis, because I think they knew that this just wasn't going to be what they needed it to be. Or maybe they saw the pre-orders on that first issue and were like, yikes, new plan, you know?
Yeah, we got to do plan B or C. Yeah,
but part of that is on Dark Horse, though. They just did not promote this in such a way that it seemed like it was going to be anything. Like, I don't remember them making any mention of, oh, we're finally going back to the original Alien and we're going to try to do something more like that film. I don't remember them doing anything to sell that. And by this point, they no longer have anything like Dark Horse Insider to give them that little extra, like, yo, this is a big deal, and we're going to give it the cover, and we're going to explain to you why this miniseries is something different than what we've done before. They just didn't have that arm anymore, and they didn't sell it in the previews. This miniseries in no way seems special to me. I completely forgot that Doug Wheatley had drawn it too. All I ever remember about this was the dumb, overlong title and the Mark Schultz covers. Until I actually sat down and started reading this again for the first time. Actually, I'd never read it before. I just tossed through when it would come through. But I'd completely forgotten that Wheatley had done the book. And really, to me, that artwork is more significant to trying to make this something special than the story ultimately reveals itself to be.
Yeah, I mean, the art is pretty good. It's really good, actually. There's a lot more detail, and I think we were talking about one of these other times where it doesn't always work when you draw every sinew and every vein and every drop of slime in an alien, but he goes in that direction, and it, for the most part, works really well. He's it's very good alien storytelling. There's a couple, maybe one or two, where like it's the perspective of the alien, and it kind of throws you because you don't ever want to be situated with the alien. So you should always be, in my mind, like opposing it or running from it type of thing. But other than that, I mean, that's a very minor quibble. I think the art is pretty good.
Well, especially because he spends a lot of time on the alien structures, and that gives it that gothic haunted mansion quality to it when you've got these extremely elaborate, extremely ornate alien environs. And of course, you've got the thing like when they go to the what appears to be the entry point of the ninth circle of hell at one point. It's like, I felt that was clearly a Dante reference when they were going up to that ledge there, and you were seeing those concentric circles going ever downward. It helps to have an artist that can sell that with that gothic quality. And he also reminds me a lot of Nick Manovat, the guy who did Cybernary at Image back in the day.
Okay.
Because I think they were both drawing from influences that included Giger, and that extremely illustrative quality really brings you into that environment. Like you really feel like you're back in the Ripley the Ridley Scott's spaceship amongst the eggs. You're really feeling the environment, but also the characters just have a darkness to them and a spookiness to them. I mentioned Sam Keith. Well, this is detailed the way that he was, but a much greater fidelity to the physical dimensions and their relation to environments than Keith was ever capable of. This feels kind of like a greatest hits in terms of that heavily rendered quality that Mark Nelson had, where I'm going to go in there and I'm just going to draw freaking everything. You do get to kind of soak in that, and because Schultz is an illustrator first, he's writing it where it's fairly sparse in dialogue. Like I got through this trade in no time. I'd like maybe a half hour for all 4 issues. I didn't even think it was 4 issues. I assumed it was 3 issues because I got through it so quickly. So you're not spending a ton of time having to go, okay, I'm looking over here, and then I'm looking over here, I'm looking over here, and I've got to read all this text about what the exposition and stuff. It's really just your eye's going to follow the artwork, and I think that it has that methodical quality that Scott had in the first movie, where it's not running around hyperkinetic like Cameron was. It's slowly, creepily making your way deeper and deeper into a place in which you should not be going. So I think it works very well in that way. So it's an instance where being so heavily rendered is, I think, to the benefit of the storytelling instead of to its detriment.
Yeah, the way he does those, like you're right, those backgrounds, it looks amazing. Like all that Giger-esque, those organic kind of backgrounds. He just kills it. And I think it reminds me a little bit of some of these faces of like Michael Zuli too. Like
yeah, I can see that. Sure, yeah.
Like the eyes, a little bit, especially when like someone's panicked and looking big. Their eyes are kind of big. It in a good way. That's a good thing. It just really, this art is pretty great.
Aliens Apocalypse: The Destroying Angels #3 was released on March 24th, 1999. Solicitation copy reads: Deep Space Rescue Specialist Electro Throop has been hot on the trail of the mysterious Dr. Lucien Keitel, always half a step behind. But now that she's found him, she may be sorry she did. Through Keitel, Throop is about to learn what may be the ultimate fate of the universe, and why it lies in the clutching claws of the aliens. Start of issue 3, like I said, we get to see that Dr. Keitel has taken the survivors of the Throop mission to his laboratory on this alien world that's full of Geiger-esque designs, including some sort of vagina stalk, where you have a mound as the portal opening, you have ridged innards, but because it's jutting out, there's a sort of phallic quality to it. There's also what appear to be marital aids all around this thing that are some sort of silos, I guess. I don't know. It's all very Giger. And if you know that, what I mean by that, it means it's porny. Very, very horny. So this is the issue where the villain explains their master plan. Dr. Keitel talks about how he convinced everybody to be party to his cult of people who would intentionally infect themselves with chest bursters so that they can be studied. Eventually his group does figure out a way to create a vaccine so that the aliens will perceive humans in their presence as though they were among the hive, among the nest, whatever you want to call them. And so they don't attack the humans, you can kind of get by, but it's a multi-part vaccine. But all of the crew that survived with groups people have gotten a dose of it at least, so that helps protect them. And he explains all this stuff about how you had the ancient space jockeys and you've got evidence of xenomorphs on Earth before any recorded human activity, and how these guys were responsible for a bunch of extinction events. Meanwhile, one of the occultists breaks into the Throop ship to get a hold of those alien eggs because they've run out for no clear reason. I don't think they said anything about them doing anything to the eggs to prevent them from creating more eggs. Maybe I missed that part. The cultist is helped by Ball, who of course turns into an evil synthetic because that's what you do in an alien story. The cultist gets an egg down its throat, but one of the surviving members of the crew kills him before they could develop a chest burster, but then a face hugger gets onto him and he gets infested because Ball's just standing there watching. And then finally we get to the end of the tour with Dr. Keitel, which is a surviving jet jockey, space jockey. They had gone into suspended animation, had been in suspended animation for probably the whole of human existence and prior to human existence. And this one has survived, and so Keitel's trying to figure out like the secrets of immortality from this space jockey. Throop can only nod and say cool so many times before Keitel catches on, and he gets mad and smacks around a little bit. The parties get separated. We get some Hawk on drone action, and at the very end of the story, Ball takes one of the xenomorph eggs deep into the labs, finds the space jockey, and puts the egg on its chest. Diamond Comics sales for March 1999. Number 1 for Dark Horse, 42nd overall, Buffy the Vampire Slayer number 7, selling 44,787 copies. Followed closely in second place, 54th overall, by Buffy Origins 3. Third place, 69th overall, Vader's Quest 2. That was at 36,040 copies. Fourth place, 70th overall, Boba Fett number 3. Fifth place, 72nd overall, Star Wars number 4. There's a big jump here. That last Star Wars title was selling 33,101 copies. Then we're going to drop down to the next title at 17,629 copies. Seventh place, 130th overall, Dark Horse Presents number 141. If that's a surprise to you, I should note that that had a Buffy cover and story. Below that, 8th place, 147th overall, Brew number 4, 13,631 copies. So quite a drop from the Buffy Dark Horse comic. 9th place, 150th overall, World Below number 1, which was a miniseries by Paul Chadwick and Ron Randall. In 10th place, 152nd overall, Ghost Volume 2 number 7, selling 12,934 copies. Then came Predator Homeworld number 1 in 11th place for Dark Horse, 154th overall, selling 12,602 copies. So again, we're over 300 copies shy of the Ghost series and not the one that Adam Hughes drew. And then in 12th place for Dark Horse, 156th overall, Aliens Apocalypse number 3, 12,147 copies. So about 450 distance from the first issue of Homeworld. Ranked 13th and beyond were manga titles and some of the Bonelli comics. Those were the Italian import digest-sized trades of titles like Dylan Dog and Martin Mystery. Let me tell you, I was still in retail at the time those were coming out. Big flop. I think I ordered a copy for the shop, but besides whatever copies might have been pre-ordered by customers. I don't remember that many customers, if any, pre-ordering that book. And I had a copy of each number 1. They sat forever. I had them in one of my glass cases. I just remember them just sitting and sitting and sitting. Nobody, I think, ever bought them. Certainly not for cover price. Maybe I liquidated them at some point.
There's 1 or 2 pages where there's one page where it's like a Chris Claremont amount of dialogue, but it's like in the middle middle of the page in one panel. Where the what's his face is talking about the fossils he found in Australia. That's a pretty big exposition, but that's the only one in the whole 4 issues. We were just like,
and you do have that Dr. Moreau thing too, where yes, it's science, but it's a science that's such a travesty to nature and all that is holy that it goes beyond science into the occult. And of course, he's coming at it with a religious zeal, and his whole process involves human sacrifice to create the aliens that he needs for this project. Because we were talking about how they found a way of essentially vaccinating humans against the aliens, where the aliens perceive the humans as being one of their tribe and therefore don't attack them. But it's a multi-dose vaccine. It's a little funky because it's a span of hours instead of months or years in which you need to be taking this vaccine, and it fails with a rapidity that is not something that you like. Clearly, vaccines are not Schultz's area. The paleontology is his area. The vaccine science, not his area. But it is an interesting idea, and it goes back again to the story that Guy Davis drew for I think it was the Dark Horse comics. Yeah, well, Survival, the miniseries, right? The Survival. So we're seeing some, and again, this is a situation where that story would have taken place decades after this story. So maybe he figured out the same thing that these guys had figured out, but at least you're seeing something getting some traction from one of the previous stories instead of it just being something that's lost to time, as that story was intended for it to be. Somebody else has figured out the idea, we can actually vaccinate against the aliens.
Yeah, I did pick up that one. That one I did catch that call. So that was good. I wish these guys would have got more screen time, because this Keitel is the guy's name, is the mad scientist. Because he does at the end, he starts to lament that he played those, like the religious card to get those people to get his crew to agree to be sacrificed. And it's striking to have him admit that, because at the beginning, there's that one guy who's like, we don't have an egg for you, buddy. So even though this is like you're ascending to a higher plane, and this is like the greatest fulfillment of our religion, you have to wait because we don't have any more eggs. And that guy goes, nuts. He subjects himself to the eggs when the new ship. But at the end, that Keitel guy, he's like, I manipulated my crew, but I knew I had no choice. I needed to see how this thing worked. And so that's really interesting and compelling to me. And his first name is, I think it's like Lucian or something like that. It's some kind of like Latin light Lucifer morning star type of callback, and like a Prometheus kind of thing, right? Where he's like trying to steal this knowledge, or to acquire this secret knowledge. And I would have liked to see it play out against the space Freemasons, because it seems like he's in it for the science and playing at religion, and they are in it for the religion and playing at the science, if that makes sense. And I think that would have been maybe not necessarily with these characters, because if he's going to croak and whatever, but he has to have assistants or acolytes or whatever that they could have played that out. I think that would have been a compelling conflict ahead of this whole annihilation wave.
I did want to say, though, just you're making me think of things here, too. As far as the Keitel character, you were asking about influences on the Gehol god. Like Keitel, my use of Keitel is Kurtz from Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, which I've used any number of times in stories. The brilliant man who acquires so much power, and the idea that absolute power corrupts absolutely, that he just does horrible things because he can. His belief in the ends justify the means goes out of control. That was another major element in my development of that story. My remembrance is he wanted to create some sort of a genetic hybrid between humans and aliens. I guess I didn't make that clear in the story, but yeah, would the human race want to do that would be the question.
And the thing is, though, is with the Lucian fellow, the Keitel fellow, I actually think it's religion first, then or at least theology, philosophy. He might be using the religious zeal on his subjects while he's coming at it from a theological or philosophical place. But it's still religion first and then the science, where I think the Illuminati guys are coming at it politics first, control first, access to forbidden knowledge that they are the ones who are determining what to do with. So I think it's politics first with them.
I'm not sure. I have a feeling that it's probably the guttural Dutch Gehol god, which I can't do correctly. But I'll tell you, this is interesting. I've always called it Gehol god, but I have no idea if that's correct. And again, trying to remember what I was thinking 20 some years ago, I thought I had been looking for a name and had found that online. And I went searching for it. I did a Google search for it. Nothing except its usage in Destroying Angels. So kept going and absolutely nothing on the Gehol god. The closest thing I could find to it was was, I think it's Cheholian or Jeholian, which is, I believe it was Frisian or some Middle Germanic language that means to have something, to acquire, to own something, I believe. And I'm wondering now, well, did I see that and extrapolated somehow Gehelgod out of that? It's weird. I do not know where I got the name. All I know is I didn't come up with it whole cloth. There was some information I got online that led to that happening, but for the life of me, it's lost to me. I like the idea of an organization that at least was pretending was after pure knowledge. And this probably goes back to, again, the films and entertainment stuff I read or saw as a kid, and having these science-based organizations that were kind of shadowy and in the background. One of the most important inspirational things as a kid, it was a television series called The Outer Limits in the early 60s, which had a great episode called The Architects of Fear. It was fascinating to me that you would have these different people who were supposedly directed by intellect and wanting the best, but it still gets corrupted in the end if things aren't handled right. And so that's kind of was the incentive, I guess, for the Gehelgod and Tellurian and Keitel. Just that all the best intentions of the world can go awry if not people's intent isn't good, or they feel they know better than someone else. There are other, classic science fiction works that I'd read as a kid that feature that type of institution. Offhand, I'm not recalling anything in particular other than Fritz Leiber's Gather Darkness, which is a great story about a futuristic autocracy that is challenged by an organization of shadowy scientists who masquerade as a religion in order to infiltrate and get their objectives. I'm sure there's others. It's a trope. It's been used many times.
But also, this goes all the way back to the Mark Verheiden miniseries, where you had the religious zealots that worship the aliens, and they're the ones who initiate the Earth War. They're the ones who trigger the outbreak of aliens on Earth through their religious zeal. So you're still playing with themes that were established from previous writers, even though I'm not sure how much of that came from Schultz, because Schultz has said that the editors were feeding him stuff and directing him in certain ways, but he, of course, elaborated upon that and couldn't remember who did what necessarily. But it seems to me like that there's a very clear line from the Verheiden initial miniseries and then these guys, although it would be a line backwards since, again, this is a prequel rather than a sequel.
Yeah.
Aliens Apocalypse, Destroying Angels #4 was released on May 5th, 1999. Solicitation copy reads, "The android Ball's secrets may have been uncovered, but it's merely the first layer that Electro Throop must peel back to get the answers she's been sent to find. There's the alien egg found aboard Throop's ship, and it involves the ancient pilot race seen in the first Alien film that introduced the creatures to man's corner of the galaxy. Plus, the fate of Dr. Keitel is revealed, and along with it, the fate of the universe." Between issues 3 and 4, there's a lot of wheel spinning that happens when they're not doing deep exposition. You do get a lot of exposition, pages and pages of it, but then everything around it is pretty much exactly what you'd expect. Just sort of going through the motions. The initial immunization of the xenomorph vaccine starts to wear off, so the Throop crew are deep in this lab complex trying to make their way back to the ship, but the drones are slowly starting to turn on them, causing problems. Also, everything is made out of that titanious alien stuff, so you got aliens like bursting through that and people falling through it. Eventually, for no particularly good reason, Dr. Keitel comes back and starts helping them again. He, for some reason, I guess, is seeing the error of his ways and wants to help them, but he also wants to doom himself because he knows he's done a bunch of evil stuff. Oh, also, one of the big things that turns him around was that he finds out about the space jockey getting impregnated, and therefore that was like the whole reason why he's continuing to do stuff, is to do the old immortality thing. But the space jockey is about to die from a chest burster, so he doesn't have anything else to stick around for. He also basically wants Throop to be like his disciple, to go out and tell people about what he's learned and warn people about the Institute and their evil practices and make sure to educate people because the Institute isn't really in favor of enlightenment, yada yada. So there's one gal with a ponytail named Jellicoe who's been hanging out, basically she's part of the core crew of Throop's, and she's the main person that Throop talks at. She doesn't have a personality either, so it's two people with no personality stating their opinions, their feelings, or reflecting on stuff that other people already said for the entire miniseries. Throop heroically pulls Jellicoe out from nesting, webbing, whatever you call that stuff, or at least attempts to. She's going to get deadened, except that the giant hybrid space jockey xenomorph comes busting through walls and terrorizing everybody. He's destroyed Ball, by the way, so we don't have to worry about that dumb character coming back again. In the end, only Throop and Jellicoe, because nobody in this book has normal names and non-goofy names, they make it back to the ship. There's a drone on board, though. The owl tries to help them, but ultimately what saves the day is that the space jockey xenomorph hybrid creature, for no clear reason, grabs the drone and pulls it out of the ship before it takes off. And in the end, Throop is caring for the owl that she plans to keep. She's also not going to go back to the Institute. She's planning on trying to warn everybody about the threat of the aliens, all the cosmic stuff they learned about. If we take Keitel's research back to the Gahel god, it gets buried. And more incidents of alien confrontation crop up and get buried. I guess I more than half believe Keitel, his angels, and his extinctions. Crazy or not, I think he glimpsed the bigger picture. He may have been a monster, but he may have done what was necessary. I hope I can do the same. And cue soundtrack, score, and space field. April 1999 North American sales. First place for Dark Horse, 45th overall. Buffy the Vampire Slayer number 8, 44,976 copies. There's a new sheriff in town, and she's the sheriff. She's routinely beating out Star Wars books, although Star Wars is still paying bills. Second place, 64th overall, Boba Fett. Third place, 66th overall, Vader's Quest. Fourth place, 67th overall, Star Wars. Fifth place, 70th overall, Crimson Empire 2, last issue, I believe. Sixth place, 75th overall, I believe it was a one-shot Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Spike and Drew. Still sold 32,117 copies. Seventh place, 133rd overall, Madman Comics number 12. Eighth place, 135th overall, Hellboy Jr. Lurid Easter Special, still managing 14,828 copies. Ninth place, 142nd overall, Ghost number 8, 13,072 copies. 10th place, back in the top 10 at least, 143rd overall, the final issue of Aliens Apocalypse, number 4, 12,807 copies. That was enough to put it 2 places above Predator Homeworld number 2's 11,447 copies, so that's something. Between the two was an issue of Oh My Goddess, Super Erd one-shot number 6, but it's a one-shot? I don't know. That still sold 12,506 copies. So Aliens Apocalypse was barely beating the Oh My Goddess one-shot.
I mean, maybe they should have, I know they get stuff wrong, but maybe they should have had some kind of like Kurt Busiek timeline at the beginning of this, like, oh, here's the religious zealots that unleash, the Earth War. Here's the teenage kids find the space jockey on this planet. Here's where they synthesize a xenomorph vaccine. If they, you don't want to do like full Stan Lee asterisk editor's note. This is alluding to, aliens race. You wouldn't want that, but because a lot of that stuff is subtle enough where I think, especially for me, having read this stuff out of order, like badly out of order, it would be cool to go like, oh yeah, I would not have, even though I read Wraith more than once, and it was one of the first things I read in this omnibus, I would never have put that together. I would have just went, and I don't like the end of this because it doesn't make sense. If there was a kind of like, hey, this is that, it would have maybe helped connect the dots, and maybe that makes it feel like these things count toward the mythos, because if they seem too disconnected and none of it, quote unquote counts, then you lose a pretty big piece of like serial fiction, right? Like people like to buy Batman or Amazing Spider-Man because those stories count. Want to necessarily read about web spinners or a thing where Batman's a Viking, because that doesn't count in the same way, right? I don't know.
Well, it's like what you're talking about. You're looking for a Mark Waid or you're looking for a Roy Thomas, and the thing is, we have that now. The whole time I've been doing this podcast, I've been going to places like Xenopedia and Aliens vs. Predator universe and such, who do that kind of deep dive, not to such a degree as someone like a Roy Thomas did, but enough to where there's a whole lot of lore that they've chronicled and they've worked out and they've cross-referenced with the novels and all this kind of other good stuff. What's tricky though is that I think in the 90s you did not have those super fans yet. You had people that were enthusiasts of Aliens who were taking this in one book at a time, liking it, disliking it, discounting this, taking this as canon. They had 10 years at this point of working with the property to start developing that fandom. but the fandom existed because of that decade that they spent doing Aliens books. And so at the time when they would have needed those people, they weren't yet of age to actually write the stories that they needed them to write. And the resources were not available on the internet like you have now, where you can easily access this information and do that kind of cross-referencing. I think Dark Horse created those fans. I think there were definitely people who liked the movies and liked the books and such, but I really feel like Dark Horse in particular, having so much Aliens material out that people were collecting sometimes on a monthly basis, sometimes catch as catch can, then you get into the 2000s and you start putting out those omnibuses where you can actually read a big chunk of Aliens material in one sitting. Of course, Dark Horse's omnibuses are just double, triple sized trade paperbacks. They're not like the gigantic, family Bibles that we're putting out today that you're reading out of. The Marvel has the family Bible version of the omnibus, the true omnibus. But having that reference in one place, instead of having a bunch of different trades or a bunch of different issues, many of which are not collected at any point in time or reprinted at any point in time before they start doing the collections in the 2000s, those people were growing up with that material, and then once they got old enough, they could afford to either buy the omnibuses or fill in the gaps. And that's when you started having those super knowledgeable, super capable fans. To some degree, I think that's what we saw. Again, like it's hard. The more we talk about it, the more unlikely it seems that no one on the Prometheus writing team had read these comic books. I feel like it's really hard to believe that they would come to and again, there is natural extrapolations from the first Alien movie, but the very specific stuff they're doing, particularly having a rogue synthetic who's literally cross-pollinating and hybriding to create new aliens, that's very specific thing to do, right? So someone like a Damon Lindelof,
he's like playing Dr. Frankenstein, right? And this one, the android hybrid, he's basically dressed up as Frankenstein. The way they color the panels and the way he has those stitches on his head and neck, it looks like a Frankenstein monster.
Yeah, and again, it's not a bunch of staples or something or wires and such. They literally have to put the stitches as though it were a monster to really sell this as being Gothic literature in sci-fi dressing as opposed to, a proper sci-fi horror like what you expect. But yeah, someone like a Damon Lindelof who's going to go off and do the Watchmen HBO miniseries and stuff. Dude clearly has comic influences. Seems pretty likely he might have read these comic books and that might have informed Prometheus. So those people did come about eventually, and some of those people did end up working on Aliens materials, and hopefully we'll be working on them in the future. We got the Noah Hawley series out later this year, but those people weren't there in 1999, and when they needed them, those people were not yet in existence or not in a position to help them to continue the franchise from this point.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a bummer.
Well, and at the end of the day, this is work made for hire. So the corporation generated this from whole cloth. There were no creative individuals involved with this. You sold away any ownership when you signed on to do this stuff in the first place. They knew what they were in for. It sucks, but yeah, they're not going to assign credit to anybody they don't have to. They're not legally required to, and certainly nobody that's in a position that's not in a position to force them to do that. So yeah.
Right, yeah. And he seemed like he was, he knew what side the bread was buttered on, and he knew the deal he was signing. He did it.
Mm-hmm.
When he was talking about it, he wasn't too salty. I mean, he wasn't thrilled either, I don't think, but I think would have been more thrilled if Prometheus was a good movie. but between the star map and then they don't have the map in the archaeological sites, but the fossils and the archaeology and then the star map, and then they go and all those beats where they land the ship. Oh no, what's going on? And they end up, they go into the structure and it's all these Giger murals. It seems pretty. And then especially when you think about the synthetic and David and the Frankenstein and the tinkering, it just seems pretty close. I mean, I don't know. Of all the ways you could have gone with those stories, why are those beats there? It just seems like somebody had to have somewhere along the line read this book, and had that informed Prometheus. Even the whole idea of there's that pre-fallen archetype state, that's like the Deacon, right? I mean, it's not exactly like the Deacon because the Deacon is a monster and not peaceful in the ecosystem, but even there's these proto-aliens. I don't know. It just seems like there's a lot there, and I guess they both make the mistake of assuming that there's going to be a part 2, and so they're going to hold stuff back. Maybe if they would have told Mark Schultz, hey, look, this is it. You got to put it all in here. Put it in these 3 issues, or no, maybe it should have been 3. Maybe put it all in these 3 issues and make it happen, and then if it's good, we'll get another one because nothing's guaranteed. I think that's what was happened with the Prometheus movie too. Is they we don't have to. We can be coy about this, or we can be cute about it, so we'll hold this part back, and everybody's boo. This doesn't make any sense. listen, we don't want to see more of this. So,
Well, and you also have the very rich, manipulative individual who's bankrolling the whole thing. I don't really think, though, that Schultz has more than what he put into this. Like, he could have elaborated afterwards, but I think that he took the directives from editorial. He came up with the story he wanted to tell based on the influences that he wanted to draw from. And I think that what he had to tell was on the page. Yeah, he put some stuff in there that you could expand upon later on, but I don't think he had something very concrete, because, again, he doesn't even remember where he got the name of the institute from. You know, and again, this is decades removed too in his work for hire, so there's only so much of this that he was going to commit to memory, but also he only is putting so much on the page too. I think this is what he had, and it just didn't go over. And honestly, this isn't enough. Like, but it does tell me that if you're going to draw from this to make your movie, maybe fix the problems that this story had, and instead they make the exact same mistakes as though this were you're adapting Watchmen. It's like you don't necessarily need to add the Watchmen to make it better. Arguably, I never really minded getting rid of the octopus like in the Snyder movie, for instance. I didn't have a problem with that. But this is not such an text that you can just film this and boom, you got your movie. Like, there's stuff here that should have been fixed that clearly was not fixed in Prometheus. So to whatever degree this was the blueprint was flawed, and the house collapsed in on itself.
Yeah. That was one of my notes too. Is like if you did read this and were so inspired and made this into a movie, it wouldn't have been more well received than Prometheus. There's the same kind of like, where are we going here? How come you set all this up? You told us that it took 2 hours to tell us the first 15 minutes of the movie. Why did you do this? I don't know. I mean, I do prefer this to Prometheus. I think not having the Prometheans be engineers, just have them be like the previous casualty of this force, I think is cool. And I think it's really cool now that you put that in my head about they react, like in like the Leonardi story, they react to the people, reached in, it triggers like a tipping point when the people are out in space and messing stuff up or being mean to each other. If it's the evil in the people triggers this vengeance, this wrath of God type of thing. I think that's pretty good. I mean, that's something I would like to see more of. I don't know. Prometheus is probably the movie I've watched. For a movie I don't like, I've watched it so many times. But I would rather been rewatching a movie based on this kind of thing. This cosmic horror kind of thing. I think that, like I said, I think there's more room to go there. I think once you do, these guys made the aliens, they made them to get rid of people, then where do you go? Kind of take some of the mystique away from it. They're more of a bioweapon than a cosmic force. I think that bioweapon is less compelling. Maybe, I don't know.
I've only seen Prometheus twice, theatrical and then once at a home viewing, just to confirm that the things that I had problems with in the theatrical were still problems. I prefer Prometheus over this story, but part of that is because the things I like about Prometheus aren't necessarily based in the story, but things like aesthetics. I think that audiences would have preferred this story. Like, if they had just filmed this, I think the audiences would have responded better to this story than the Prometheus story. I think that there is a more conventional arc, a more conventional resolution, and I do think that the more cosmic terror elements, as described in the story, would have worked better than all the teases and cryptic nonsense from Prometheus. But I would have hated it because the stupid King Kong alien would have ruined it for me, and I do think it's still rather indebted to the Alien Resurrections hybrid alien at the end of that as well.
That was all the artist. I don't think I gave him any directions other than it had to be huge. It had to be in keeping with the size of the jockey, the species, the giant from which it hatched. But other than that, that was all Doug Wheatley's design.
And I just hate that so much, and it's so dumb that it kind of ruins the whole book for me. But also, these characters are just garbage. And I do think that the characters, at least the main character in Prometheus, was more interesting than anybody we saw in this. And I'm not sure how much I would have really gotten out of the Institute and the dude with the hawk and the council and all that kind of stuff. I think that would have been wearying for me in the movies. So I'd rather the unanswered questions from Prometheus than some of the firmer answers they had in this book. But I do think this would have played better as a movie if they just filmed this. I think that audiences would have responded better and been more agreeable to this and be more interested in seeing this progress onto a sequel than they were with Prometheus.
Yeah, I think, maybe. It does have the third act is a lot more palatable. Traditionally, you know what I mean? For a movie, the King Kong alien. That isn't, it's totally out of left field, right? Because they already have, at this point, dog aliens and all these other kind of things, right? Like, they already established that it mimics whatever it hatches out of. So maybe that's something that's not in Prometheus actually actually, now that I'm talking, now that I say that out loud, those things are huge. Where's the huge? Wouldn't that inform the xenomorph's form that comes out of it? Maybe not. I don't know. I didn't mind the King Kong alien. I did mind that it had the little snout, like the trunk. That's one of the things from the comics I don't understand, is why they took the space jockey's mask and decided that meant, oh, there must be a snout in there. Like, why?
Are you meaning the elephantine Dark Horse aliens? I mean, that was something they established in the first miniseries, and the original Dark Horse presents short stories and stuff. So that's just came with the Dark Horse. It's like they saw that tube and they saw an elephant snout. Blame Mark Nelson for that, I think.
Oh, well then, shame on you, Mark Nelson. Holy smokes. But anyway, the Kong alien at the end, his little tiny, they minimize it, thank goodness. But I didn't, aside from that little snout, I didn't mind it too much. I mean, you could see it coming once David Frankenstein brings the egg out of the landing, or their ship. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I like it. I like at the end, it has like a good, there's so much of this is like a gothic horror type of thing. It does have a pretty fun, corny ending where the alien xenomorph silhouette is in the stars, and it rolls into this is a cosmic force coming from the stars, and no one's going to be able to stop it, type of thing. Thought that was a nice touch. Probably, a little bit corny, but is all right.
Well, and I don't really get why the giant alien would be damaging fellow aliens. Like, it's still part of the tribe, so I don't know why it was just running buck wild and beating up everybody. Aside from it helped to get the protagonists onto their ship to get the heck out of there. But I don't understand why they weren't just amplifying the threat of the aliens by having a gigantic alien. But also, I just think it's stupid, and I thought it was a terrible design. And as much as I didn't like the Alien King from Rogue, at least they did something with the design there. With this was just, yeah.
Well, again, that's pure Lovecraftian, a big universe of which we are just a component. It gets away from the whole religion, especially, Judeo-Christian religion, that we are the chosen people, the center of the universe. We are God's chosen. Neat thing about Lovecraft was he threw that all out and said, no, real story is we're no more important than anything else. And there's bigger forces out there than us, which again, for me, is where both an enormous feeling of awe comes from, as well as a feeling of, potential horror. My other interest in going in that direction was, and this is the predominant theme in my Xenozoic stories, is the ecological angle, that there's got to be a balance between everything in a system, in a natural system, for it to work, which may or may not be true, because the man who's proposing this, Keitel, is crazy. He's gone over the edge. But his belief that they are like a universal plague that's going to sweep across, and that responds to civilizations to get to a certain point of technological abilities. They become spacefaring races and are a threat to this theoretical ecological balance throughout planetary systems. And again, I try to keep it vague whether or not this is true or if it's just the ravings of a madman.
The trade paperback collection of Aliens Apocalypse, Destroying Angels was released on October 20th, 1999. 96 pages, $10.95, age range 16 plus. The Sleuth Station copy is basically a regurgitation of that from the first issue. I'm not going to bother.
When we revisited the comic for our recent review episode, it was pointed out that the method of travel that the ship employs was very similar to the then recent film Event Horizon. Was that an intentional inspiration?
You know what? Honestly, I've never seen Horizon. I want to, and I need to, but I understand, though. I know what the concept is. It was more the idea of particle drive and bending space comes more from Dune, actually. So I was using terms like bending space that come straight from the novel Dune, and I believe it was in the Lynch film too. So that's where that came from, and that is actually a contrivance that I put in there that I'm kind of, it's so much not a part of the rest of the Alien universe. I felt I needed something to get them there in a timely fashion, rather than the years that would take them to get there under the conventional method that would have interfered with other stories and timelines. I needed something to get them there quickly, because this is early on. This is relatively soon after the first movie in chronological terms within the concept. It's a contrivance that I wish there had been another way around, but I couldn't figure out a way to make the story work without having that in there, getting them there quickly, instantaneously. Nostromo, of course, from the first movie.
All the ship names.
Is a Conrad.
Narcissus, Sulaco. A lot of the expanded universe does it as well. Goes down those routes.
And I also, reading the story, I realized I named the ship that goes after, the rescue ship, the Rachel, which is the ship that rescued Eshew's Ishmael in Moby Dick. That's where that came from.
The trade paperback was listed for September 1999 comics. In the section for trade paperbacks, Aliens Apocalypse Destroying Angels ranked 24th, selling 1,505 copies. It barely beat Body Heat from NBM, which I assume was some form of porn. It was beaten by the Gen 13 I Love New York one-shot or collection, I don't recall. God, there's so much ahead of it. There's a Star Wars trade at the top of the charts, Manga Volume 4, Return of the Jedi. DC's dabbling into manga with Gone Underground was in second. Batman No Man's Land Book 1. I should point out too, okay, so the top seller, that Star Wars one, 10,685 copies. Big drop down to Gone Underground, which was only at 6,578 copies. So you can just see the raw power of Star Wars over everything else. You got Daredevil Visionaries, Kevin Smith, Jack Kirby's Forever People. That was, I believe, that Black and White Connect collection, which is the first time I read, well, not Forever People. There's a collection of Secret Wars. There's a Spawn trade paperback, Superman in the 60s, Green Lantern Fear Itself softcover, Superman for All Seasons hardcover, Ron Mahaf Volume 14, a Trans-Metropolitan trade, a Boba Fett Enemy of the Empire trade. This is at 3,119 copies. Stormwatch Final World trade paperback, Gru Inferno, More Than Mortal Collected Edition Volume 1. That was I don't think that was ever really that hot, but it was still rode the bad girl trend, I think, for Image. Dark Horse's Shadow Lady Dangerous Love Collection, Magic Knight Ray Earth Volume 3 from Mix, Red Sonja Life and Times of a She-Devil Volume 1 from Cross Plains. I don't remember what collection that was, but that was, I believe, a short-lived venture of Roy Thomas's where he was reprinting or making new Red Sonja material, I think in black and white. Daredevil Gang War, No Need for Tenchi Volume 6, Diabolic Volume 1-3. I'm not sure how that numbering system works. So yeah, 24th best-selling trade paperback. This is not a relevant franchise in comics at this point. Besides the trade paperback, Aliens Apocalypse was collected again in Aliens Omnibus Volume 6, released by Dark Horse Comics on December 31st, 2008. Those were those fat little digesty things, 6x9 dimensions, so smaller than a normal comic book, $24.99. Much more recently, it was collected again by Marvel Comics in the Aliens, the Original Years Omnibus Volume 3 on November 23rd, 2022. That's the edition that Odell was reading from.
Big fan of, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a big fan of motion pictures. I'm a big fan of classic comics. Fortunately, when you're in the business, most of my time drawing goes to work now. I don't spend nearly as much time just having fun with my drawing as I used to, but that's okay. This beats pumping gas for a living. I don't do a lot of interior comic work anymore other than my own because I'm slow. I'm very slow. I can execute covers on a schedule, but generally not the interior work. So I've been lucky enough, to been included in a number of series that needed cover work. Because I was refreshing my memory, I really like the way this cover turned out. I like to instill that sense of movement. Yeah, that was a cover I liked because I liked the way the owl turned out in that one too, in the cover that you put up. And that's my wife posing on the ground there, being crushed by the alien.
The thing too with Prometheus is the threat seems to be various creatures created by the black goo, because you don't have the classic xenomorph until the end of the movie. So it's not that they were being plagued by xenomorphs, they were being plagued by all the other weird life forms created by the black goo, causing problems on the ship.
Right, yeah. The branching evolutions of all these different things. Yeah. And it was Covenant. It was the one where it was in like the pollen, right? Is that how they did it?
Yeah, they're like the spore things, and they were having other predators and stuff. And again, that's something that I think they're going to get into with the Noah Hawley thing. It's something that I've thought about for a while. It's like, what do you do with Alien at this point? Well, one of the things that's always bugged me since they had the Alpha Centauri, Poontang, and aliens, is that they introduced the idea that there are other alien species and people are aware of that and interact with them in some fairly intimate ways, and yet we never see that in any of the expanded media. And I thought, well, what would happen, again, you've got the whole Giger thing. What if you had a Sill-like alien out there that comes into conflict or is an evolution of these xenomorphs? What if you had something like the Thing from Another World? And I kind of think that's what Noah Hawley is going to do with this new series, is they've made clear that it's not just going to be the xenomorphs that are coming to Earth, but there's like the 5 most dangerous species known to mankind, and they're all going to get loose. And I think that you're going to see a little bit of a monster rally there of alien species that are wink, wink, nudge, nudge, thinly disguised versions of things we've seen elsewhere.
Oh, that'd be pretty cool. I saw that trailer where it's like there's 5 aliens and we've, whatever. For the first time when I'm messaging you on Discord, that's why it took so long for me to get back to you. I was like, about the time for recording this, I was like, oh my God, this is on TV. And then I went to a spiral. But yeah, I never seen that trailer before. I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, I've only watched the short ones. I've only watched like the little 30-second teasers. I know there's some longer ones with more narrative elements, but especially because I'm not sure exactly when this series is going to start, and I don't like to be spoiled. I like to go into things as cold as I can. It's like I'm on the hook for this. I'm going to at minimum watch the pilot, so I'll watch the pilot before I watch any of that extraneous stuff, because if there are any surprises, I don't want them ruined by the apocrypha and such.
Right. Yeah. I prefer to go into stuff cold too. That's how I went into Romulus. Like I got halfway through one interview with the director, and I was like, you know what? I think like you said, I'm already on the hook for this. I like what I heard. I'm gonna tap out and just go in the theater. And that was a good choice. But I think, oh man, I think it'll be good. They put a release date. That was the other thing, but I was freaking out too much and I didn't retain it. It wasn't soon enough, but I think it was the end of summer at some point. They're gonna put it out, is what they said.
Yeah, I don't need months of hype for a TV show. Have the streaming or on broadcast within 6 weeks to 2 months. That's the most that I need. And they've been teasing this for the better part of a year now. So maybe even longer than that now that I think about it. Yeah, no. But I'm done. I'm done with all the extra material. Bring on the show.
Yeah, it's like elections, right? Like you don't need to start the election cycle 4 years. It's a 4-year cycle, and you don't have to start running it 3 years ahead of the election, right? It's just too much.
Well, like 6 weeks after the inauguration, they were already talking about midterms, and I'm just like, you people are the problem. This mentality is the problem. No one actually governs anymore. It's constantly just trying to get rehired and starting the work to get hired as soon as humanly possible. Stop it. Tell me about the movie 6 weeks out, 2 months out. If it's something like Superman, yeah, you can tease me over the course of a year or so. I forgive you that, but not a TV series. Come on, man. Give me a break.
Right, yeah. And it's good. I think when something's really good, or when something's good, it can feel like it's really good if you go in cold, right? Like if you don't know what you're getting into, the stuff that other people are taking for granted, you can be surprised by. I think that's pretty good.
Well,
and I like to go with stuff cold too, because I've read previews catalogs for 15 years or whatever, and trying to tease out every single plot point and trying to predict and all this involved with being a comic book person. It's just nice to go like, all right, I have no idea what this is. Let's look at it.
Yeah, I still go through the previews catalog every month, but the simple fact is I went from reading every single page of anything related to the comic books, at least, to reading as little as possible, not because I don't want to be spoiled, but because I just don't care.
But it's refreshing to be able to go into something that you might be interested in.
Yeah,
completely cold.
Yeah, like Sinners. Right? I didn't even watch a trailer for Sinners. Just like everybody told me you need to see Sinners. I went to go see Sinners. I'm glad I did it that way. There wasn't anything that I couldn't entirely predict in there in terms of like, oh, this is such a twist, but at least some very basic stuff that I could see coming. I was able to at least not know for sure what was going to happen until it actually happened. And then of course there were some good surprises, which I saw later on were teased or outright spoiled in the trailers. And I'm glad I was able to experience those cold, but it wasn't a situation where it was like, what a twist. It was more like just being able to be in the moment while it's playing out and fully relish it without the distraction of, oh yeah, this is that thing that I saw before. The other thing I was going to say is it's an interesting time because obviously Predator's been revitalized by the Prey movie. And I still think that Predator is a concept that works best as a film because I don't think there's enough there to really warrant more than 90 minutes or 2 hours at a time for a story. Where I think that Aliens is really just doesn't function well as a movie series anymore. And that you cannot progress with these stories and these concepts outside of a longer form. I think Aliens needs a TV series, a prestige TV series. And I think that that's going to be the right thing for them. And I'm looking forward to seeing if that plays out the way that I hope that it does. But I've basically given up on Aliens movies at this point now because I just don't think they can do anything interesting with the property without some other external media helping them to get past recycling the exact same thing over and over again. That's like Romulus, I think is the the worst Alien movie because it's pure product. It's purely, here's the thing that you want without any real thought, artistic flourish. It's just like, here is the thing you like, but we've given you more of it, and we've used CGI to make it move faster and be more lifelike. And there's no character here. There's no real story here. There's no real point here, but we're going to give you the feel goods. I cannot maintain my interest in Aliens if that's all they're going to give me. This television series is one of my last hopes of being able to continue to fuel any passion I have for the Alien franchise, because I'm done with these movies at this point.
I like it. I like Romulus in the, I'm going to regret saying this where anybody else could hear it again, but it's almost like oh my God, do I want to say this? It's almost like The Force Awakens, right? Like, I feel like it's a reset. Like, it's somebody saying, we know why you liked these movies in the first place, and it's not like the last three or whatever it was, right? Like, that's kind of, like when the trailer for Force Awakens comes out and they show the Millennium Falcon fly, everybody, loses their mind and jumps up out of their chair and cheers, and they show Han Solo and they show, lightsabers, and everyone's like, hooray!
Jonesy, we're home.
It's what we want it to be. Yeah, exactly. It's the thing we wanted.
He said the thing. He did the thing. She did the thing like the other guy did the thing. Yeah. Right. It was very much. I mean, when you think about it, Romulus was basically Alien Resurrection, and you take all the weird French stuff out, and then you stuff familiar alien stuff in its place. But at its core, it's basically just Alien Resurrection again, but make it more aliens, make it more Cameron.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't try to get the thing that really just I don't understand about Resurrection is the whole Buffy Ripley clone thing. Like, it's trying to have your cake and eat it too, right? Like, I don't like Alien 3, but let her stay dead, for crying out loud. You know what I mean? Like, if this is a franchise, move it forward, right? Don't bring her, like, oh shoot, we shouldn't have killed her. That was too much of a bummer. Let's have the clone. I don't get that part of it.
Well, actually, and that was one of the things I hated the first time I saw Alien Resurrection, and I've yet to really come around on that movie. But I will say that I respect that Sigourney Weaver made the choice to just play a different character. And I didn't like that character. I didn't want to see that character. I wanted, if you're going to do this resurrection thing, give me Ripley back. And they really did not do that. And I respect that she made that choice and stuck with that choice to do a different character. And I am somewhat curious to see what they're going to do with her in the comic books when that starts to come out, because that's one of the things that Schultz talks about in the interview too, is he has the Ripley 8 clone in one of his miniseries. So I'm curious to see what he's going to do with that.
What is it? Who's got the clone?
The Ripley 8 clone is going to be in, I believe, Aliens versus Predator versus Terminator.
A new one?
No, the one from the early 2000s during the crossover Palooza.
Oh, okay. All right. I was like, there's a new, Mark Schultz is writing a new, what? But okay. I haven't, all right. I'll check that out.
Yeah. Now, the fans apparently hate it. So, but then the fans loved this, and I thought this was crap. So maybe I'll like it. Probably I'll just hate it in a different way than I hate this, because that's basically the expectation at this point. But I am curious to see what he's going to do with that character. And being a contrarian, maybe I'll be the one guy who likes the damn thing.
I mean, this thing, I don't hate it. It kind of makes me sad because, if this came out in 92, right, and they could just do whatever they wanted, maybe this would have been, I feel like he had to have something planned, and maybe it could have expanded the lore, even though, I don't know how much lore we're dealing with a licensed comic book of a movie, but because the movie is always going to trump it anyway. But, it could have been, feels like it could have been something. Kind of, maybe it's just because it more, it aligns better with my impression of the aliens as a cosmic force than a bioweapon. I don't know. It would have been cool to see more. If you read enough comics, you get to a point where, you're never going to see the story you want to see, right? You're never going to see Ralph and Sue ghost detectives. We're never going to see Alien Annihilation Wave figure out anything else about those guys. It's just going to be up to whomever. If they read it or in a fan fiction, that's where the answers to all this stuff is, fan fiction.
Yeah, and I was speaking hyperbole. I don't hate this miniseries, but like you said, I'm sad, I'm disappointed, I'm just tired of being disappointed and frustrated that none of these books are really firing. And again, you don't have those people who are so in love with the franchise because they were exposed to it as young children that they don't care that it's work for hire. They'll put their whole passion and pour all their ideas and concepts into this thing that's going to be owned by a corporation just out of their pure love and affection. Same reason why people have written all these Batman Batman and Spider-Man stories over the years. And it just, they didn't have those people yet. And to some degree, I think they'll have those people in the 20 teens. Again, I've gone back and forth on continuing this podcast because I intend on going through the crossover palooza, but I'm just not sure if I'm going to be there for the 2009 second decade of Dark Horse. They're not giving me a lot to keep me going, but I do think that I might find more of what I wanted from these comic books in the 20 teens than I can reasonably expect at this point from the next decade of these books.
Yeah, because after that, Xenogenesis, but after that, it's 10 years, and the 10-year break is at the end of this omnibus. I mean, there's a whole other omnibus after it, but it goes from Destroying Angels and Xenogenesis in 99 to May 2009 for Aliens #1.
Well, and we do have an older, more wizened John Arcudi. That could be good. Like, I was really disappointed with what Arcudi did in the Aliens material I've read so far, but he was still the younger, finding himself Arcudi. By 2009, he's the version that had been working on stuff like BPRD, and it had runs on books that I really enjoyed. And, maybe that's going to be something better. At the very least, it was able to sustain for another decade. Like, they were doing Aliens and Predator stuff right up until Marvel took over, and Marvel has been doing pretty well with that material as well. So they must have found some angle that they were able to revitalize this franchise. And obviously, they took some time and took some thought to when they were bringing it back. And I know there's a lot more cross continuity between the various licensed materials from Fox from that point onward. So maybe I'll like that stuff better. I know there's some problematic people involved with that, which could be an issue, and not necessarily people that I've ever had any real good exposure to previously anyway. I never liked DMZ as a for instance, but we'll see what happens. I really hope that something like the Noah Hawley series will help to keep my enthusiasm up in a way that's gotten really beaten down by these awful late 90s comic books, or these lame, limp, disappointing things that keep coming up over and over again as I'm doing this podcast.
I'm surprised, but very happy that people enjoy, especially the Destroying Angels, which I think is the one thing I did in all these series that really worked well. I'm very happy that people still enjoy that.
2 additional brief notes as we conclude. After the recording session, Odell Abner Dracula sent me a direct message with some additional information.
Since recording, I've been dwelling on the aliens as a divine wave of annihilation. I thought of 2 models for the concept. First, one kind of aligns with what they laid out in Prometheus. There's something more out there in space, but it's guarded by the aliens. If a greedy, negative, destructive species reaches the stars, the aliens adapt that and react with hostility. The joke I thought up for this model is, it's like the source wall of the new gods if the wall also hunted species to extinction. The other way I think about it is if the universe was a living entity, and the entity might be described as divine, the aliens might be the white blood cells of this entity. And since Destroying Angels was released in 1999, we missed an opportunity to make a virus movie reference. Assuming I remember the episode correctly, we are of the same mind on the subject of the virus movie. The other thing that occurred to me since is that 1. If the aliens are some kind of countermeasure and they do learn from people as the prologue implies, and are activated by exposure to what I suppose is evil, then 2. In that model there is an opportunity for a benevolent species to reach the stars, encounter the aliens without activating them, and proceed into the unknown divine vastness of space.
To clarify on the trade paperback that Aliens, Apocalypse, Destroying Angels beat in the trade paperback section, that was Kevin J. Taylor's The Girl. It's a very popular, high-quality pornography. I'll also point out that we had an unusually high activity, not just on the previous Dark Horse Presents Tumblr for Aliens vs. Predator Eternal, but also for previous Tumblrs. It was nice because it helps to offset the slow but steady decline and death of Twitter/X. It's just unfortunate that Blue Sky Culture will not be picking up any of that slack. 20th Century Fox 2010, XC Ted, I think that's some variation on Abducted, Alex O, The Amazing Spider Ben, and Otter, Anime Hoi 1, Bats Cats 890, Between the Pages blog, Big Bad Centrist, Captain Entropy, who added, "This will be probably my last plug in these spaces for Diablo Frank's Aliens Eternal podcast, which I guessed it on. It was a lot of fun to do, and I'm proud of the end result, especially after Frank edited out anything dumb I said." Chris Dunford, Dark Seraph's Corner, Dave's Comic Heroes blog, DC Dave, Del Dracula, Derek WC, MG, Hal Kolbeck, History of Comics on Film, Hicks, Inferno Swindle, The Irredeemable Shag, Jason Morrow, Jarrett Keene, Keith G. Baker, King Dinosaur, Kuma Pinku, N19, Professor Boomer, Rad Adventures Podcasting Network, Red Light, Relatively Geeky Podcast Network, Sin Titulo, Teal Productions, This Is Not the End, and the Al-Chahali.
This has been a Rolled Spine podcast. All audio samples are believed covered under fair use laws. No copyright infringement is intended.
Coming in July, Dark Horse presents Aliens vs. Wildstorm, with guests Paul Hicks, Billy Hines, Del Dracula, and perhaps more.